Hi, our story today is Emmaus, and it's found in Luke 24:13-35. For the disciples, the past 3 days had been a cauldron of swirling emotions, stress, and trauma. The men had seen their rabbi betrayed and crucified. Then, on the third morning after Jesus' death, some of the women came to declare the mystery of his empty tomb. They said they had seen an angel who told them Jesus had risen from the dead. But when Peter and John went to investigate, there was no angel to be found. The body, however, was gone. The tomb contained nothing more than a pile of discarded grave clothes. Two of the men, Cleophas and Luke, were worn out with it all, and they needed to escape the crowd and blood-stained city for a while. The man left Jerusalem through the western gate and followed the smooth Roman road out of the city. The early afternoon sun warmed them as the space between the homes that lined the road lengthened. The air was fragrant with new life as flowers and trees answered spring's call. After an hour of walking, the men entered a pleasant valley. A short time later, they left the Roman road and turned onto the road towards Emmaus. The path sloped gently upward as it rose out of the valley. As Cleopas and Luke walked, they discussed all that had occurred over the last few days. There was so much to try to understand. They were sure Jesus had been God's prophet, yet their leaders had crucified him. Then, to have the woman say he was alive, it was difficult to know what to believe. The two men crested the hill and saw in the distance the ridge that sheltered Emmaus. Another path intersected theirs, and a stranger who had been traveling along the adjoining road fell into step beside them. He walked with them, listening quietly as they continued to sort through all that had happened. After a moment, he turned to them and smiled. "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" he asked. The men stopped abruptly. Cleophas and Luke looked at each other and then at the ground, and when they lifted their heads again to answer the stranger, their faces were etched with sorrow. "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened these last days?" Cleopas asked the stranger. "What things?" the man asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all of this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning and didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels, and they said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it was just as the woman said, but they did not see Jesus." The stranger placed his hands on Luke's shoulders and then motioned for them to walk with him. "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all the prophets have spoken," he said. "Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" As they walked, the stranger began explaining to them how everything that had happened to Jesus had been foretold in the scriptures. He began with Moses, and then explained the prophets as well. Cleopas and Luke listened with expectant hearts. Each step they took with the stranger on the road to Emmaus seemed to lighten the sorrow that had settled over them since the 3 days earlier when Jesus had been crucified. Soon the remaining distance to Emmaus had been traversed. The sun was low in the sky as the stranger bid them goodbye and turned to continue on down the road. "Wait," Luke said. "It's getting dark. Don't travel any further tonight, friend." "Yes, please," Cleopas continued. "Come stay with us and continue your journey tomorrow." The stranger agreed, and soon the men were gathered around the table for the evening meal. Soft lamplight flickered over the fresh bread, broiled fish, and goblets filled with fragrant wine. The stranger took the bread and thanked God for it. He broke a piece from the loaf and smiled as he handed it to Cleopas. Suddenly, as if the veil was lifted from the disciples' eyes, they gasped in recognition. It was Jesus! And then he simply disappeared. Cleopas and Luke sat staring at the place where he had been. The bread, freshly broken, lay on the table. Luke turned to Cleopas. Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us? He said. Cleopas nodded. We have to go back to Jerusalem and tell the others. Luke agreed, and the two men arose, leaving their dinner uneaten on the table, and when they stepped back onto the Emmaus road, they relied on the bright spring moon to illuminate their path. It had been a very long day, but they hardly noticed the 7-mile walk. Their hearts, which only a few hours before had been weighed down with grief, were now filled with joy. The cross and the horrors of the grave had been transformed by the power of the risen Messiah, who had broken bread with them at the table, the bread of life himself, who had joined them as they walked along the road to Emmaus. My risen Savior, how many times have I been blind to your presence as we journey with me on the road of my loss? How often have you whispered meaning and purpose to me as we walked along the way, to find I only have ears for your voice of my unbelief? Break the bread of life for me once again, Messiah, that I might know you. Your words are life and power. May my heart burn for you alone. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.